Delay in the India-US trade deal. Is everything really dependent on Washington? Imagine this. A phone call that never happened, yet it turned into headlines across the world. It was said that if that call had taken place, the India-US trade deal would have been finalized. And because it didn't happen, everything is now supposedly at risk. The real question is not why the call didn't happen. The real question is whether India's fate is truly dependent on a single phone call. Social media is buzzing with one question. If this deal doesn't happen, will India's growth come to a halt? An atmosphere has been created where India's economic destiny appears to be trapped in the hands of one phone call, one agreement, or one country. But amid all this noise, a calm yet extremely important voice emerged. A voice of an economist who has not only studied policy in textbooks, but has also witnessed it firsthand from the decision-making chair. And she said something that completely changed the narrative of this debate. Concern over the delay in the India-US trade deal is natural. After all, the United States is the world's largest economy, the center of global finance, and a source of investment, technology, and demand. But former RBI Monetary Policy Committee member and renowned economist 𝐼𝐨𝐥𝐿 Goyal has directly challenged this fear. She has clearly stated that India's economic progress does not depend solely on Washington. And this is not just reassurance. It is an observation based on ground reality. According to 𝐼𝐨𝐥𝐿 Goyal, excessive focus on the United States is nothing new. Even during her time on the RBI's Monetary Policy Committee, she noticed this trend. When she interacted with the markets, the same questions kept coming up repeatedly. What will the US Fed do? How will the American economy perform? As if the remote control of India's monetary policy was placed somewhere else. But according to her, this perception is driven more by media exposure and information flow than by reality. News related to the US gets more coverage, foreign direct investment also comes from there, and as a result, attention naturally shifts in that direction. However, the real picture is far more nuanced. 𝐼𝐨𝐥𝐿 Goyal raised a highly technical but crucial point: capital flows and exchange rate independence. It is commonly believed that emerging economies, especially countries like India, have limited freedom in setting interest rates and monetary policy because global capital is highly sensitive. But based on her experience, India has enjoyed far more autonomy in this area than is generally assumed. She explained that India's capital account convertibility is calibrated, not fully open. This means that hot money, which moves in and out rapidly with small interest rate changes, is not as dominant in India. Because of this, the RBI has often been able to take a different path from the US. In other words, even when the Fed is doing something else, India has been able to set interest rates according to its own domestic needs. This weakens the big fear that if America does something different, India will become helpless. But the debate around the trade deal is not limited to monetary policy alone. The real question is about growth and global positioning. 𝐼𝐨𝐥𝐿 Goyal added another powerful perspective to this discussion: the changing structure of global growth. According to her, emerging markets now contribute more than 50% to global growth. This means the world economy no longer runs only on the strength of the US and Europe. Asia, Africa, and Latin America have now become growth engines. This implies that if America is not ready to cooperate, the world will not come to a standstill. Countries will develop their own alternatives. Supply chains will find new routes. Trade will look for new partners. 𝐼𝐨𝐥𝐿 Goyal believes that India should understand this reality and shape its strategy accordingly instead of turning every delay into an existential crisis. She clearly stated that there is no need to panic excessively over the trade deal with the US. What matters is identifying what alternatives are available and how effective they can be. Ultimately, negotiation itself means that both sides assess their priorities. If one path is temporarily blocked, having another path ready is a smart strategy. Another interesting point she raised was about India's dependency on the US market. The common perception is that India's exports are largely dependent on America. But the data does not fully support this view. According to 𝐼𝐨𝐥𝐿 Goyal, India's dependence on the US is quite limited compared to countries like Japan or South Korea. America's share in India's total exports is not so large that the economy would be shaken by a single setback. This is an underrated advantage. Countries that are heavily dependent on the US have less leverage in negotiations. India's relative diversification gives it flexibility. India is gradually developing multiple options, whether in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, or other emerging markets. This diversification increases the economy's capacity to absorb future shocks. But this does not mean that India wants to distance itself from America. 𝐼𝐨𝐥𝐿 Goyal addressed this point very clearly as well. She said that India does want to engage with America. There is a large Indian diaspora there, strong technology collaboration, and deep linkages in education and services. India also benefits from many forms of engagement with the US. Therefore, engagement will continue and negotiations will also go on. However, she drew a clear red line: domestic sensitivities, especially in agriculture and with vulnerable sections of society. According to her, India will not compromise its farmers for the sake of any trade deal. This is not just an emotional issue. It is also a political and economic reality. Many of India's free trade agreements have been shaped around this principle, mutual respect for priorities, which has resulted in win-win outcomes. In her view, if a trade deal is delayed, but India gets a better, more balanced agreement in return, that is far preferable to rushing into a deal that causes long-term harm to domestic businesses and weaker groups. A slow deal is better than a bad deal. That was her clear message. This entire debate also took on a political twist that made headlines even more sensational. Earlier this week, US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick claimed in a podcast that the trade deal was almost finalized but failed to happen because Prime Minister Narendra Modi did not personally call President Donald Trump. According to Lutnick, everything was settled. Only one phone call was missing. This statement caused a stir in Indian media and policy circles. Was such a major trade deal really dependent on a single phone call? Had diplomacy become this personal? But India quickly rejected this narrative. The Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson 𝐟𝐨𝐥𝐥𝐸 clearly stated that these comments were not accurate. He explained that India and the US had already committed on February 13th last year to negotiate a bilateral trade agreement. Since then, multiple rounds of discussions have taken place, and on several occasions both sides came quite close to a deal. He also clarified that there had been no lack of communication between Modi and Trump. Over the past year, the two leaders had spoken on the phone 8 times, discussing several aspects of the broader partnership. In other words, the phone call story was oversimplified and misleading. So, if there is a delay in the India-US trade deal, it does not mean that everything will fall apart. It simply means that negotiations are ongoing, priorities are clashing, and eventually a path will emerge that is sustainable for both sides. And if it takes time, that is not a failure. That is strategy. Perhaps the real question is not when will the deal happen. The real question is what kind of deal will it be? Because in the long run, only those deals work that are built on balance, respect, and realism.
Taught you something new. Do not forget to like and share this video so that this information can reach others as well. Your likes and shares are a source of inspiration for us. If you have any questions or suggestions, please let us know in the comments. It will be our honor to answer your questions and listen to suggestions. And yes, if you like our content, subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so that you stay connected with every new story. Thank you. GRT Business YouTube channel sources, news from various news agencies, opinion polls and other public sources. We try to ensure that every report and summary is accurate and verified, but we are not responsible for any dispute or error. Our aim is only to provide you with accurate information.